So let me welcome you one and all to what I think you're going to find is an absolutely fascinating subject. A lot of people are interested in gamma beats per se. Of course, everyone here is interested in the expansion of consciousness. And we're going to see the effects of gamma on the expansion of consciousness, which is made possible for us by our wonderful guest, Bob Holbrook. Who has written the SAM recordings for the Monroe Institute. And I would just first of all like to welcome you and thank you, Bob, for being part of this event.
My pleasure.
And also to welcome our practitioners and self-trainers who are tuning in large numbers this time, and even more so our TMI friends. We had 60 people on at last count. This is by far the biggest webinar that we've had, so I do dearly hope that it will be the best for everyone. And so I thought that first we would talk to Bob, and then we'll go on to the PowerPoint show. If that sounds like a plan for you, Bob?
Sure.
All right. So I wonder if, first of all, you would just tell us a little bit about what TMI is and how you happen to get involved with TMI in the first place.
All right. Well, the Monroe Institute is a place where you can go and do residential experiential programs and experiment with the audio technology they have there. But they're very purposeful workshops. And if you go onto their website at monroeinstitute.org, there will be very good explanations of those programs. And again, most all of those are supported with audio technology, which supports very positive states of consciousness, ones that we've researched and have practiced with for several decades. So I welcome anyone who is not familiar with the Monroe Institute to check it out and give us a visit. It's a worthwhile journey. For me personally, I discovered the Monroe Institute quite accidentally. I was to say it shortly, I was a raging workaholic, and at one point I was ordered to go on a vacation, and I didn't even know what that was. So a friend of mine said, "Oh, you have to go to this Monroe Institute. And it's in the mountains. It's beautiful, and do all this, mindfulness practice." And all I was really hearing was it was in the beautiful mountains. They feed you, and you get to lay in bed all day and listen to things. So it sounded good. So I gave it a try, and I was pleasantly surprised. What was significant for me was the tools that I learned and the experiences that I had were life-changing for me. And that happened in August of 1994. Several months later in January, I was in a really bad automobile accident with severe head injuries. And I ended up in a place where I was in a coma for 6 weeks. Then when I started to have awareness I couldn't tell if it was night or day. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear right. I couldn't discriminate sounds. I was in a very strange place for quite a long time. And as I emerged from that place and I could start to hear again, almost like an infant develops its hearing again, and sounds had meaning, I had I experienced what I call a much deeper sense of hearing, where audio had so many deeper levels, like you could hear music in the wind or in the machine or whatever. I could hear these patterns of resonance like I never could before. And I became very interested in that. And went back to the Monroe Institute, had many more experiences and experimentation on my own. And now I actually am involved with the Institute. I work there as a director of innovation and create audio technology based in neuroscience and experiential feedback from the many people I've worked with. And I've worked in clinics with PTSD and addiction quite extensively, and have had very good results from that in, some difficult situations. The Monroe Institute is more focused in general well-being and is very good at that. They don't do therapeutic work there, which doesn't mean that what they do isn't therapeutic, but that's not what they do. What they are doing is helping us understand, explore, and deepen our understanding of consciousness so that we can find out how much more we truly are than what we have limited ourselves to. And that expansion is quite easy because you don't have to do anything new except shift your perspective and become aware. And so the audio technology that I work with and design is very helpful in that. It doesn't cause it because these shifts are very natural, but it can support it very, very well. So that's what I do. And fortunately, in the last year or so, we've gotten together with Judith and the Awakened Mind and the Mind Mirror technology, and we've been able to validate a lot of what we've done scientifically and empirically, but also the developmental opportunities have just grown tremendously. And while I'm sitting there watching people respond to meditations where I've designed the specific audio signals and then observe in real time their brain, the brainwave activity that's going on to see that, yes, there is a frequency following response, and wow, it works very differently than I thought it works, but it works well. I think I can design an even better exercise that will support even more people in better ways. And indeed, it seems like that's working for us very well. So I'm really pleased to be part of this whole project that we're working on now to develop even greater potential support so that we can all reach the deeper levels and have more meaning in our lives and more well-being, happiness, and joy.
Okay, I was just trying to say that the Institute for the Awakened Mind is delighted to work with TMI because we're really looking at some pioneering technology that is for us showing some extraordinary brainwave states. You'll see that in the PowerPoint show. And we have actually made some changes to both the software to be able to research, do the data analysis much better, and also even have extended our pattern analysis capabilities, because now with TMI, we're seeing people go up to 100 hertz frequencies with these SAM beats that you have designed. And I wonder, so if you would just tell us a little bit about that, especially for IM people who don't know too much about the gamma use in SAM and how that differs. And let me just start by saying that back in 2012, when I went to TMI the first time, they were talking about using some gamma that was just under discussion, but I think that TMI had the same problems that others have with gamma beats trying to entrain people to them. And it was that people would get headaches and feel nauseated. And I listened to one once myself from a different vendor entirely. And I felt like somebody was hitting my brain with a hammer. It was just a really horrible experience. But people haven't had any trouble with the SAM beats as you have arranged them. So I wonder if you can just say a little bit about that, how that differs.
Sure. With the technology that I work with and some of the tools, I'm able to create signals that are very, let's see, how do I say it best, are very comfortable for our neurology and mimic our normal auditory processes. And so it's not a disruption. And then because of the way the spatial angle modulation technology works, I can work with harmonics and multiple layers of signals at the same time. And what that does is your brain hears that signal. First of all, it's pleased because it's harmonic. Second of all, it is trying, whether you consciously do this or not, and some musicians will immediately try to figure out what note that is and what harmonics are involved, and that can actually be distracting. But what happens is, because of those multiple layers, each layer can support a different function in the gamma process. And what ultimately that does is I'm able to provide a gamma synchrony set of signals that will meet you where you are, instead of trying to impose something on someone, because everybody's not the same. We play the same signal for everyone. We're all coming from a different place. We all have different hearing apparatus. We all have different brains. So if that gamma signal that's trying to support you is not at the speed where you are, it's like a water skier. If you're sitting in the water and the boat's going to pull you up, if it takes off too fast, it just flips you right up and over and out, and you can't engage the water. Whereas if it pulls you up too slowly, you get tired and you can't hold on. If it pulls you up just right, there you go. You're sailing on top of the water. And so we have all these different levels where you will hook in from the place that you are. And so it's a way to kind of tailor an exercise that's being presented to everyone, but each person picks it up a little bit differently. And the spatial angle modulation technology with the harmonics is very good at that. And I've had a lot of good feedback for several years now, and we're improving it all the time. And it's getting even better. And as Judith saw, we can get to pretty high levels of vibration, but also high levels of resonance and synchrony. And so I'm really pleased with what I was able to see on the mind mirror, not knowing for sure, other than people tell me things, and I get qualitative reports, which have guided me well so far. But to actually see the empirical data makes it very real. And then it also shows me what elements might need to shift a little, or what elements might need to, be more presented more clearly, or more sharply, or more beautifully. And so it's been a great journey, really. Yes.
That's wonderful. And I think also of help is not just the brainwave patterns, but that we've done such a good job with your help of eliciting subjective feedback from people. They say, I love that music, it took me to amazing places, or the music was, I just didn't feel right, or so it's a multiple layers of kind of feedback that we're getting here from this increasingly standardized program that we're coming up with.
Well, and that's a very good point that I do need to say more about, and that is, it's not just about the signals. There's a lot of subjective. I could create, just because I can help people get to a really synchronous, widespread, organized gamma pattern, well, we can do it through the overall process, the context of that exercise, and it can be a very positive, growing, joyful experience. If you're like shocked or scared and startled, like into survival mode, you'll see awesome gamma signals, but it's not very pleasant. So, just the nature of gamma by itself doesn't make everything all goodness and light, warm and fuzzy. So there is a lot more to it than just the basic, here's how we support these signals. In the way we support them, in the progression of how they're supported, in the intention that people take into the exercise, in the warmth and coziness of the room, the facilitators, monitors, that all comes into play. And with all that together, we've seen some, incredible, and we've gotten these recordings of, people having the big life-changing, moment of, epiphany. And I'm really fortunate and consider it an honor to be present and see those kinds of things and learn from them.
Oh, we do too. So it feels like it's time for me to start this PowerPoint show, but I did promise people, and I think they will be very interested in hearing, so if maybe we can save it to the end of the program, some more about your work with veterans and PTSD and Gamma.
Okay.
Of course, the information on Gamma is constantly being increased by researchers. And that's a part that I think most people don't know very much about. Okay, so this was called The Journey to Happiness. Bob was a facilitator of that program, and his lovely wife, Miranda, was there also. You'll see a picture of her maybe in a minute. And this occurred June of last year at the Monroe Institute. Of course, people who do mind mirror work will appreciate this photograph. You can imagine trying to hook up 14 people while the program is waiting to get underway. We see Felice Dubois, who is here with us today, being hooked up by Laura Eichmann, who is one of our 4 monitors. And then there's Nancy Dorman on the right being hooked up by Robert Bernard, who was another monitor. I was the 3rd one, and then Ross Dunseith sat in and was the 4th monitor just because we didn't have one, but we had 2 other people and we had an extra DSU and enough EEG sensors to run more. So we were in David Francis Hall. You see a picture of Bob Monroe there on the far wall. And there's Miranda standing up in the front of the room. So we arranged ourselves in 4 pods. So you can see Laura here with her mind mirror in the foreground. And so she is monitoring 4 people. And so was Robin there in the background on the left. And then there's Ross. And he was monitoring 4 people. And I was sitting actually right here, monitoring 4 people. We had a lot of arranging of the room to do. People are sitting in anti-gravity chairs once they finally got hooked up. And of course, we were very lucky in that we had some helpers who had some EEG experience. They helped us with the hookups just to speed things up. But some people were not comfortable in the anti, and some people needed to lie down. Of course, we were drawing patterns the whole time and monitoring 4 people simultaneously on each computer. We just worked our best, kind of worked our way through it, dealing with each little technical difficulty as it came up, and everything always resolved beautifully, in great part because of this excellent team of supporters at TMI who were always ready to provide what we needed. And then the lights went out and it was time to start the meditation. You can see Laura's in the foreground, Robin in the background, just showing how their people were kicked back and getting to work. The standardized protocol that I mentioned began with a questionnaire. Do you have a regular meditation practice? If so, what methods do you use? For how many months or years have you been practicing? How often do you practice and for how long at a time? Now this helped us match their brainwave patterns with our drawings and also to do the data analysis. Was that subjective feedback is a very important component of our understanding of their patterns and changes. And then another component, what is the extent of your experience with TMI, whether on-site, off-site, or in listening to guided meditations at home? Then, do you practice any other spiritual and/or healing modalities? If so, which one or ones? And then what do you focus on, if anything, during your meditation or spiritual practice? How busy or quiet is your mind? What feelings or sensations do you typically experience? Please describe. Now, that question, you might wonder why it's in there, and I'm reminded of Anna Wise's priest who came to her and said, well, you know, my meditation just doesn't seem like it's all that it could be. I just feel like I could go deeper. Well, good information, because as it turned out, he was in high beta throughout the meditation, and he was thinking the experience of meditation. And then what drew you to meditation or spiritual practice and how long ago? Please describe. And that turned out to have some really important answers that we were awfully glad we had. Some people came to it because of difficulties in their lives. Some people, a lot of people did actually. You know, we go for the understanding once we hit that brick wall so many times. But some people had actually had a Kundalini experience, profound Kundalini experience. And so that really helped us understand why we were seeing, for example, so much gamma in their patterns. And then, of course, when the lights were out, we were drawing their patterns. For those TMI folks who don't know what you're seeing with these patterns, I am going to explain a little bit about them. But basically, what we mind mirror practitioners do during each and every session is to draw the brainwave patterns. We're looking at the attenuation. I didn't put a case because it kept changing. But here I do a drawing for eyes open. And I can see she doesn't have a lot of alpha there. For eyes closed, massive pattern change. And then we did, as part of the opening baseline, the animal sensualization, which is where you project your awareness into that of an animal, only you think you're just imagining it, but what you're really doing is getting involved in your sensory alpha brain waves. And when certain questions are asked, you actually start to elicit information from your subconscious mind that is extremely meaningful and very useful to you. So the drawing the patterns, that was an important aspect too. And so now let me just explain a little bit about these patterns and what you're seeing. I gave the people at TMI during the professional division a seminar where I first showed this last month, this PowerPoint show. I gave them like a 20-minute explanation of brainwaves, and I'm going to just do it as integrated a way as I can on this slide and a next one. But just know that if it all looks Greek to you, it's going to be increasingly understandable as we move through this PowerPoint show. Up here in the top left, you see the ordinary mind, which is what most people are functioning inside of. This beta up here, which is in the highest frequencies of the pattern that we were originally looking at, which was this top band 38 all the way to 44 hertz. That's the classic mind mirror. Well, that beta is the active, externalized thinking, conscious mind, basically of the intellect. You're using your beta right now to process the words and to process the pictures and the understanding. This amplitude of beta is pretty high. This is for random thinking. But if you were to start to think faster and faster because you were multitasking, or you had to make a list or make a decision, your beta would amplify so that the movement would be more like this. And if you can see that, I'm increasing the amplitude of beta with the cursor. If you're multitasking and some kind of concern were to overcome you, then you might move into still higher amplitudes of beta, which for short we call high beta, to say high frequency, high amplitude beta. And that would be a stress, anxiety, and panic pattern. And of course, everyone knows what that feels like. Your consciousness starts to diffract, the brain becomes overwhelmed, shuts down, thoughts bounce around like billiard balls, and it's really hard to catch a grip, and that's a surefire way to set off the fight, flight, or freeze stress response. Now, what you most notice in this beta, in this pattern of ordinary consciousness, is that there's no alpha, as there is over here in a meditation state, and in the awakened mind state, and in the evolved mind state, all of which are higher states or levels of awareness. The fact that there's no alpha is partly explained by the fact that there's this beta, the external focus. But alpha comes into play when you simply close your eyes in most people. It also comes into play when you activate your sensory awareness, say you're walking out in nature, and also when you relax. But mostly it's, as in meditations, guided meditations, when you simply relax enough to become aware of your inner senses, sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, a sense of feeling, kinesthesia, movement through space. And when that alpha is activated, as it is here in these other patterns, then you have access to something else that's not present here in ordinary consciousness in most people, except when they do make some inner reflection, and that's their theta waves. Theta is the repository in these lower frequencies below alpha of your long-term memories, and thus what also resides in theta will be your creativity, your insight, and your spiritual awareness. So you can see that people who are running around, which is most people most of the time in this ordinary mind, or number one, not relaxed, and number two, not in connection with the essential self. And that is really what is residing in this theta repository of the subconscious mind. And that's connection with who you really are. Now, who else is in theta, however, are all of our issues, all of our stored patterns in consciousness, not just positive, but the problematic ones that we project outside into the world. And so this theta and this alpha combined in meditation, which is the definition of meditation, is where we do our inner healing. It's also where we connect with the insights that you're going to see people connect with later on when I start showing you their brainwave patterns in this PowerPoint show. So inner healing happens in this meditation state. Not just meditation, it can happen also in dream work, inspired writing, psychic inquiry. And when you're in this alpha theta meditation state, not always, but most of the time, in what I've seen, what will also be active is your delta unconscious mind. And you see it splaying outward. Well, that's in an attempt to understand what's going on with other people, to understand who they are as a spirit. These are the brain waves of empathy as well, and also psychic awareness. Delta is a kind of radar, and when it's activated, then it's like your field, it is your field, expanding outward to sense and know what cannot be known by the logical thinking mind. This is very instinctual, very ancient part of us. And when that delta reaches out to empathize with another person, then that intuition is wide open, and that information about that person can come into that delta on almost like a beam that's returning. It is that, actually. It's the psychic awareness that everyone has. So the ordinary consciousness, aren't we lucky, has the egoic thinking mind to process reality, but it also has this instinctual radar, which is a protector. Delta will also be very active in people who are hypervigilant, say they've had problems in childhood or they've had some trauma in adulthood. Well, that radar turns on and very often stays turned on all the time, so that people will have that protective device, so that this deep level of sensing can warn them about danger. A lot of people have this turned on perpetually, and those will be the psychic empaths, the people who feel other people's feelings. So what we really want to see in terms of the growth of consciousness, the symphonic evolution of consciousness, is for people to close their eyes, move into some sort of sensory awareness that's relaxed, so they'll get that alpha bridge and be able to access the subconscious mind in theta for insights and understanding and spiritual connection, preferably with their delta turned on, so that the search for understanding includes their spirit and working on the spiritual level. So we were not so much looking at the meditation state for the TMI studies. We were really looking baseline for the awakened mind. As you can see, this awakened mind pattern is the same as the meditation pattern, except it includes this beta, this very quiet, very different, you see, no high frequencies in here as opposed to here. So this is a mind that is able to do problem solving, to move down into that theta, to access insights, to move into theta or delta, access spiritual revelations, to understand how to heal and how to move forward in life. It really depends on this beta, though. If that beta can't be quiet, then this inner awareness is not possible. Now what happens, I'll just say this as a shortcut, we could talk about this whole process of moving from the awakened mind to the evolved mind for quite some time. But essentially, what happens is that the person who accesses this state of creative flow and peak performance, that is the definition of the awakened mind. Anna Wise called it the high performance mind. Early on, Max Cade called it lucid awareness. This is a peak state that we would love to see people bring out of meditation, but really is quite the learning process, because it involves externalizing your alpha to be able to have that connection with theta with the eyes open, where typically when people open their eyes, that theta that alpha collapses. So it's a journey of really clearing a lot out in theta. Whatever keeps us from being relaxed, whatever keeps us from being unguarded and empathetic with other people, to be able to condition and stabilize that pattern with eyes open. However, people, even in meditation, if they flare very often into this awakened mind pattern, then they have the capacity to develop this pattern of oneness and unity, which by no coincidence is a circle. That evolved mind pattern is an amplification of the awakened mind. Theta amplifies and merges with alpha. Beta, the ego says, oh boy, something's really happening here. Fantastic, and it merges with alpha. And then this delta, which is reaching outward to seek for information, energy, insights, understanding, it actually turns up right here because information is flowing into this evolved mind pattern. You could call this enlightenment, illumination. We, for this study as a kind of shortcut, called it unity consciousness, because that's really what it is. There are no blocks within the different levels: conscious, subconscious, unconscious mind. The blocks disappear. The difference between subject and object disappears. There is only oneness within oneself and with all other people, with the earth, with this cosmic level of reality. I like to call it the quantum sea of light. You can go all the way and call it God, whatever it is. When people experience this absolute knowing and understanding, it's extraordinary experience for them. And you can't go back once you've experienced it. You're going to have a whole lifetime trying to get back to it, because there's a sense, oh, this is who I am. I'm home. There's no this skin that I'm living inside of in this earth plane. Oh, I'm here to do something. And there's usually a spontaneous inflow of insight that tells you what you're here to do and how to do it. And so in this training, we're looking at those patterns, though not the meditation pattern, but we're certainly looking for the awakened mind pattern and the evolved mind pattern. And then one more, this extension. So here's the awakened mind, here's the evolved mind, circle, and then here's the Gamma Synchrony pattern. This is a pattern that involves gamma, and we were looking at very closely in this study because, of course, Bob's SAM gamma beats. We expected for them to elicit the gamma. Other things happened I'll show you in a few moments that we didn't expect. We kind of theorized might expect, but are very exciting for us as researchers. You can see that the awakened mind goes up, as I said before, to 44 hertz. The evolved mind only goes up to 44 hertz, but the Gamma Synchrony pattern goes up to 64 hertz in the top two bars that are this odd color of fuchsia. That pattern, it took me a long time to realize it, but actually in the classic awakened mind pattern, we were looking at 2 bars of gamma in the 30 and 38 hertz. And what I noticed after a while is that once people tapped into these 2 top bars, the 30 and 38 hertz, in the evolved mind pattern, which likewise contains the 2 top bars of gamma, then they actually would start to access higher frequencies and produce this pattern. This pattern came from psychics and healers that I was monitoring over a period of time. And at first, they would have this untrained gamma with frequencies that would extend outward in amplitude in the top 2 bands and sometimes lower bands as well. And it was, these were the people who would report, oh, I can't stand to be around this electricity. I'm a nervous wreck. I'm talking all the time. They would be in Kundalini arousal. And what we found is that if we took them down into their theta, that untrained high amplitude gamma would reduce, and then they would form this more integrated pattern. And that is basically an awakened mind pattern integrated with these high frequency gamma. Now, this study also involves 100 hertz patterns, which we didn't have in this. We did have them in the first study, but we weren't looking to see at that point what those patterns would look like. You'll see that in the show. So those are the three patterns we were looking at, and these are the instruments we were using to look at them with. First of all three of these instruments are part of what we call the mind mirror summary. We can look at the mind mirror summary for the entire session or for segments of the session. And the more we had to drill down into the data, the more grateful we were for the ability to segment a period of time and get these three instruments, because very often the story was in the small details that were occurring within those segments. So the mind mirror brainwave pattern, this is a gamma synchrony pattern on the left and an awakened mind pattern on the right. I hope you're starting to be able to see these patterns a little bit. This is an upturned delta just slightly, where this bottom band at 0.75 hertz is narrower than this 1.5 hertz band. And this is a hint that there's going to be a flare of the evolved mind at the bottom for this person sooner or later. So this is an averaged over the period, over the whole meditation, or over a segment of the meditation, meaning that the person definitely produced more amplitude in the left hemisphere than the right. You can see that. And you can see that just barely this person's peak alpha was at 10.5 hertz, meaning the strongest amplitude in this category of alpha, which is green. So the peak alpha was at 10.5, but over on the left brain, this person was having a lot of 9 hertz alpha, which means they were going deeper. I know I'm going through this fast, but as I say, you'll catch on to this more as we go. When the 9 hertz alpha is that extended, it means that there is a lot of connection with the theta subconscious mind here at 7.5 hertz. So the summary pattern is really important, but it's not everything. We still have to go into the session to understand, you know, because really the person could have flared into all kinds of other patterns during the session, which is exactly what always happens. One of our keys to finding out what else was happening in the session is the mind mirror training summary here, this statistical column chart. What this is based on is the fact that there are certain ratios, 1 part beta, 2 parts alpha at this peak frequency at 10.9, 1.6 parts theta, and 1 part delta. That is the ratio for the awakened mind. It's different for the gamma synchrony pattern. It's going to be typically more gamma than this, and you can have less theta because they're operating in higher frequencies. So theta is not usually as extended in people who are producing the gamma synchrony pattern. So the chart says 10:1, where your patterns get more and more highly refined according to how much they meet these ratios as you move down toward 1. So on training level 10, for the awakened mind, it says 100%, and your dog could get 100% compliance with the pattern at training level 10. Training level 9 means 90% compliance and 10% deviation from the ratios of the pattern. Training level 8 is 80% compliance, 20% deviation, and on it goes down until we reach training level 5. Training level 5, we found just through a lot of the passage of time, is where most advanced meditators, psychics, healers, spiritually advanced, highly developed people are getting scores between 75% and 90, I said 98 because hardly anybody gets 99%, although we have seen that in these TMI studies. But so our kind of measuring stick is training level 5. If you have a score between 75 and 98% on training level 5, which means 50% compliance with the ratios of the pattern, 50% deviation, then that is a high-level awakened mind pattern. This evolved mind pattern, that's a very good score for the evolved mind. This is a very good score for Gamma Synchrony, although we, as you'll see, we saw much higher scores. Only in these TMI studies, I had not seen any Gamma Synchrony scores above the 66% more before. And what we also look at is training level 4. This is a very highly stringent level where the person has to be 60% in compliance with the ratios of the pattern. And that anybody who scores pretty much anything on training level 4, we're pretty much wowed by that. You're going to see a lot of great training level 4 scores as we go through the slides that I created for each person. So the other important thing about the mind mirror summary is the summary plot. This was actually Oksana's idea. She said, I was training her in Australia, and she said, well, what if I'm drawing the patterns and I miss something? She said, why don't you create, and so Steve Clark, our software engineer, did create this fantastic summary plot, which is invaluable in these studies at TMI, because it allows us to click on this dot, which is actually on training level 3, and find out through the timer clock and the Ballistus window exactly when the person reached that extremely highly refined pattern. We would also want to know why this person reached this cluster of Gamma Synchrony patterns at training level 4. And in the December study, we'll show you that in a few months down the line, where we were monitoring 16 people doing out-of-body and remote viewing training at TMI. Boy, when we saw a cluster of dots like this at the beginning, that's usually when people said, that's when I hit the target, was right in the first minute or two. So we're looking for clusters, we're looking for high value dots, and we're looking for the timing. We can look at this for the awakened mind, and we do. These reports we produced, we clicked on this, did a separate screenshot, or rather separate snip for evolved mind. We were looking at all of these different things. And so this next slide shows you where we started with these studies. First, we're going to look at signal quality. If there's a break in this line, which has to be at 1.0, then there was an electrode problem, and we're going to take an artifact marker, and we're going to isolate that so that it doesn't come into the data in any of the data screens we look at. Especially, we don't want artifact in the mind mirror summary because it will completely skew the statistical values. And then we're going to look at SEMG artifact amplitude. If SEMG artifact is below 5, it's not a problem, but you can see that it was just above 5 right here. So now we're going to wonder, wait, did the person move? And of course, we're observing them during the sessions. We're trying to make sure that they're not moving and try to make notes of that. But it's not always SEMG artifact. It's not always about movement of the head, neck, and shoulders. It can be because the person's gamma increased. And this creates all kinds of difficulties for us in analyzing the data, because in this case, it's a protracted surge in gamma. See? So that's not artifact. This is artifact that shows up as this spike, these spikes right here, you see. Even here, they're coming out of the meditation. That's easy enough to identify. And this is easy enough to identify as not being SEMG artifact because of this gamma surge. You see how they're moving together? So the software is saying, oh, wait, there's so much gamma in this pattern that it must be movement, and so it's registering it as movement, but it really isn't. So we spend a lot of time with these studies making sure that what we're looking at is not artifact. It's really making sure that it's real gamma. So now I'm going to start showing you this pattern that, you know, a lot of people might think, oh, for people, there's a lot of resonance between people, and there is when they're meditating. But people basically are meditating inside of their own brainwave patterns. This is person number 2, activated gamma synchrony into sensations and sounds. And look at the gamma that she activated. What she did was imagined in her mind what the gamma synchrony pattern looked like, and she, during the meditation, used that pattern as a portal to the experiences that happen in gamma, which can be everything from out of body to spiritual illumination to compassion or love, and many other different things. As we move through the slides, you'll see more of what they're associated with. And so this person also, during vibe flow, said she brought the earth into her belly. She has a little bit of 15 hertz beta here because she does kind of self-talk meditation where she narrates her way through a body relaxation. So that's really showing up here. You can see how very different these patterns are. But you also see that she has an upturned delta. So she's very much down in her unconscious and subconscious mind despite this 15 hertz band of beta. This person says that, well, she breathed into Kundalini, her Kundalini shaking, and found a peaceful bliss. And I saw her do some shaking in a previous meditation. She's one of the people who had this Kundalini rise of energies, and the Quakers and Shakers and the Kundalini meditators, they'll actually shake as they meditate. So this is a high value awakened mind pattern, maybe not with a ton of theta that we'd want to see in the awakened mind, but she's also got this, the start of maybe an evolved mind pattern up here, and you'll see later on that's exactly what she's got. This person in vibe flow said that he drifted in and out of focus 27 and couldn't bring it back. And you can see high amplitude theta. This is where you can fall asleep because theta is about the movement into REM sleep, and delta is about the movement into deep restorative dreamless sleep. So he still got his alpha, so he wasn't asleep completely, but he could have been in a deep subconscious trance because of this very high amplitudes of theta and delta. That's why he said drifted in and out, couldn't bring it back. If he'd had stronger alpha, he could have brought it back because it would have brought him higher to the conscious border in beta where he could perceive that information. So people resonated with each other during these meditations, but they were basically using a combination of their own best meditation pattern as it was, I don't want to say, well, stimulated by the gamma beads. So what we did for each person was create an individual report. They varied because of all these windows we had to pull up to make sure it was an SEMG artifact, and also just to be able to get, here's a screenshot at 3224, this is at 3247, this is at 3419. When we would see something interesting happen on the summary plot or just through scrolling through the patterns, then we would bring these in, and these are extremely time consuming to find them and snip them. But we start with the mind mirror summary, we look at the alpha amplitudes. This was dominant frequency, but we were also looking a lot at the alpha amplitudes because we wanted to see if they had eyes open alpha. And we were always looking at the gamma amplitude summary windows. And a summary window just says that it's a summation of what happened throughout the entire session. This is beginning, this is end. This red trend line tells us when the amplitude increases. I think if this is dominant frequency, that's when the frequency increases. But all the other amplitude windows we're looking at are amplitude windows. So we in the Mind Mirror community are reading the pattern in such a way that when amplitude changes, that's our clue to what's actually happening in consciousness, because we're looking at the interrelationships of these frequencies. If this theta increases to here, and this delta increases to here, and this alpha drops away, we're looking at the amplitudes, we know that person's asleep, you see. So individual report, 13 to 19 pages for each person, and then our next step was to look at a compilation of abstracts. Here we see we looked at her Gamma Synchrony scores from opening to closing, her Gamma Synchrony scores and the SAM meditations, her Evolved Mind opening to closing, SAM, Awakened Mind opening to closing, and then Awakened Mind, SAM, her statistics for every single one of these patterns, so that you're able to say, looking at this, that had an eyes open Gamma Synchrony pattern of 53%. Now someone might say, oh, that's probably because she was just thinking. But if you look at her eyes closed, 69%, no, then that's her real alpha. And so we're saying she started out at 53. She ended up by the last animal sensualization and eyes open and eyes closed, which was the opening baseline, 70%. These are massive increases. She closed her eyes, 69%, training level 5 ratios to start with, ended up at 97%. That is just a massive increase. On the animal meditation, her Gamma Synchrony went from 65% to 87%. So I did the compilation of abstracts myself based on the individual reports that came from Laura and Robin. Each of them did their 4 reports for their, 1 report each for their 4 people, and said, okay, well, here's what's happened for her. And indeed, her Gamma Synchrony scores at that time were unprecedented within the Mind Mirror database. We've never seen 87 and 97% Gamma Synchrony. Astonishing pattern, you know, and you just saw it. It's this massive, massive gamma. And so we did that for each person, and what that ended up, well, and then we did this statistical chart for Gamma Synchrony in Excel. My grandson had to do this for me because I didn't know how to do Excel, although I'm really starting to learn. So for Gamma Synchrony, for each of the people, we just wrote opening baseline with eyes open, eyes closed, the animal, and then the series of meditation. Bob wrote meditations called Loving Kindness, Who is Happy, Vibe Flow, Crystal Clarity, Set Point, Virtuality, Presense, and then we went on to the closing baseline, again, eyes open, eyes closed, and the animal. If you just look at doors, holy cow. 1 star means had an experience. 2 stars means had a profound experience. And I'm happy to say that Analyze's animal sensualization, look how many profound experiences were elicited. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 14 people had profound experiences during the animal. But by the close, more people had profound experiences with the 2 stars because of everything that happened herein. Their patterns improved so dramatically throughout. And here's Percy with her Gamma Synchrony score of 82%, 87, 87, 87, 88. Astonishing scores. Now, of course, that wasn't the case for everyone. If you look at person number 8, for Gamma Synchrony, they had 28%. That dropped down to 3. And then for this meditation, suddenly something happened and it jumped way up to 51%, then 57, then 72. Ended up at 34% for the animal, where it had started at 28%. So you can see that there's been an extraordinary evolution of consciousness in here for just about every single person. And that's why the executive summary says, wow. That of the 14 people measured, all of them showed advanced brainwave patterns during 1 or more segments. This executive summary, I tell you, I thought I was going to blow out some brain circuits trying to crunch all that data. You know, what are the trends? What are we seeing? It's even harder on the out-of-body and remote viewing because, whew, I mean, we've never seen patterns like this before. You had just matching up the subjective reports, It's really complex. I'm actually quite proud of myself for figuring out how to do this. And then in the end, what the executive summary says is that all 14 participants produced advanced brainwave patterns during the opening baseline and one or more segments, which is really saying something. You know, the opening baseline has no SAM beats, you see. This is just the eyes open, eyes closed, and animal sensualization. So the conclusion here is this was a particularly advanced group of people. The second thing, everyone responded to the Hemi-Sync SAM beats and music by producing sustained surges, as you saw in that summary window, of low, mid, and or upper gamma, and some people all the way up to 100 hertz. As a direct result of the Hemi-Sync SAM training, the closing baseline showed that everyone increased their statistical scores for eyes open, eyes closed, and or the animal meditation in one or more of the three patterns: awakened mind, evolved mind, or Gamma Synchrony. And then lastly, and not leastly, their subjective feedback and the closing self-assessment matched their brainwave advances. Everyone reported an expansion in consciousness and feeling happier. So now let's start looking at the patterns. Here's a psychologist, an outreach trainer, says down here for TMI. She's attended TMI programs since 2002, and she listens to Hemi-Sync and SAM meditations at home. She started with a Gamma Synchrony score, as we saw earlier, of 65. This is the animal meditation. This is a gorgeous pattern. She's got a little bit more amplitude in the left brain. She's quite a thinker, but we don't care when the patterns are this advanced. But you can see there's a little bit more hemispheric symmetry by the end in the animal meditation. And look at the difference in her gamma. Phenomenal difference. And what's interesting was that during the opening baseline, she was uncomfortable in her anti-gravity chair. It took some doing to get her more comfortable. So some of this could be person thinking, oh, I don't really like this bar against my feet. But this one, she was completely comfortable. No SEMG artifact, not even the slightest mention of it. These are absolute real brain waves. And so she wrote, now I have more evidence-based trust in what I thought and hoped was true. That is, that gamma is abundantly and readily available to me, that my practice, which is SRT, it's a spiritual therapy of some kind, is strengthening my mindfulness skills, that I do produce these states regularly and without real effort. Hooray! And then she writes, my delight is that my best score of the week was the ending baseline with no SAM, and here it is, in this animal sensualization. Because that is the norm of life, and that it occurred while I was feeling deep love and appreciation for my beings, one human, two cats. I'm inspired to do more straight meditation to continue to strengthen my brainwave patterns. It's really quite an amazing change. Of course, we know that after a meditation, gamma lasts 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And why we care so much about gamma is that it is forming new brain cells in the frontal lobes and in the hippocampus. So those are the centers of intelligence and the capacity for more intelligence, as well in the hippocampus of greater memory storage and retrieval. And gamma is always also associated with rewiring, and that's when where a lot of people are really looking, as Bob is, at the effects of gamma on PTSD. They are finding that gamma frequencies will help people do what awakened mind people do, which is to bring what was unconscious to consciousness. And when it's brought to consciousness in gamma, it's released. And then the new way of being is conditioned. Now, this gamma is also associated with attentional awareness, compassion, love, out-of-body experiences, but it's really about transcendence. If those of you who have mystical or spiritual inclinations want to think of it this way, it's a bigger brain and it's a bigger crown chakra and third eye. because that's where people feel gamma. They will report sensations of light. They will report, I felt like an energy was rising up my spine, or I felt like my crown chakra was opening, and things like that. Now, this was a man who is a retired maintenance planner who does Hemi-Sync 3 times a week. He had 20 programs at TMI. He wrote in his closing self-assessment, which was another instrument we asked everyone to fill out, I had never really felt SAM frequencies before. This time, I moved into the meditative states, and it was easier to slip into altered, relaxed states. By the end of the week, I felt relaxed and stress-free, and you can see that in his pattern. It's a beautiful awakened mind pattern. 80 for this meditation, who is happy, 87% awakened mind on training level 5, but a 33% on training level 4, and that's very, very high value. The highest value I've seen for training level 4 for the awakened mind is 48%. And so in this meditation, in this brainwave pattern, he writes, I had a very deep insight. I wasn't coming up with anything and started regressing into negative feedback. I asked, what do I have to offer? The answer was, I love unconditionally. I fully trust the answer, he said. I don't know where to go from here, but I want the emotional and physical rewards of loving unconditionally. You know, a lot of people talk about unconditional love, but when you feel it down in your theta and your delta, in your subconscious and your unconscious mind, and it rolls across your alpha bridge into your thinking mind with the feeling accompanying it, that's a life-changing experience, truly life-changing experience. And he did this within only 19% gamma synchrony. So here's the case I was speaking of earlier, where all of your insights don't have to happen inside of the awakened mind. Although I will tell you that this gentleman, I just dearly love him. He came to the RV OBE program, and his gamma synchrony scores were up in the 50s. So once you open that door, once you begin to understand how to deal with, and this was his biggest challenge all week, is a 9 hertz alpha peak that will allow you to slip down into trance very easily, or into sleep very easily. And he did battle it. But he was in my group, and as did Laura and Robin. When they saw this and the person said, I clicked out, well, it was immediately obvious that it was because of the 9 hertz alpha peak. So we just told them, sharpen your sensory visualization. You know, come to the meditations having walked around outside to ramp up your metabolism. Don't eat so much at lunch. There are very, you know, easy modifications you can make in your consciousness and in your body to raise that alpha peak up to 10.5 hertz. For who is happy, he managed by the amplitude of that 9 hertz and the accompanying 10.5 hertz to stay completely awake to his experience and to have this massive aha. No doubt the SAM beats helped. I mean, this is 19% gamma synchrony. For the awakened mind, he would have 0 amplitudes up in the 59 and the 49, and he would have a bit less, more like what I'm drawing here for the awakened mind. So he is actually operating in his gamma, but this is basically what we're seeing here is an awakened mind pattern. When he came back and to do the RV and OBE program, ton more gamma. So open the door, boy, it starts getting conditioned. This woman, I just loved her. She is a part-time real estate agent of Middle East descent. And I'll just tell you her experience first. She says, at first, I was in this area of all these angelic children. It's a TMI program called Lifeline, where you help stuck spirits. I was there and also with children just dying. So many children were dying, a lot of them homeless in the Middle East and elsewhere. That was my job, just helping them, joining these loving children. Tears were pouring out, and believe me, we checked her SEMG artifact and made sure that we were not looking at tears in the pattern. I saw Bob Monroe in his TMI office. He said, "This is just a start." He said, "Tell Scooter," who is the director of TMI and also Bob Monroe's daughter, "to thank the loyal employees." Now, of course, everyone cracked up when they heard that. I visited living children out of body and sent them good energy. I asked, what was the message? Working with the cancer children is in the back of my mind. We went to hospitals. I would lift them and take them up. You know, I don't know if she's followed through on that, but boy, she had a inner certainty that this could be a future for her. So look at her pattern, the set point. It's 100 hertz something. She's got this 10.5 and 9 hertz alpha. If it were a 100 hertz awakened mind pattern, it could be that in the top part, but in the bottom part we would see less theta. And we wouldn't necessarily see this upturned delta means an upflow of information from either her unconscious or the collective unconscious. But the fact that, look at her pattern, she's got all this amplitude up in these top 3 frequency bars, or what we call upper gamma. 65 to 100 hertz is upper gamma. And she's got big high amplitudes in her mid gamma at 59 and 49 hertz. Some of which is pushing out through the downflow of these frequencies, her beta frequencies here. But what's most interesting about this pattern is it's almost diamond shaped. She is very close to a diamond shaped pattern here, and she did produce some diamonds that I saw in her drawing. She was also at my table. And what we found with the diamond pattern is that when people say, I was in my higher self, and she was definitely in her higher self, given this description. So this diamond shape seems to be an interim pattern between the awakened mind and the evolved mind. But with these 100 hertz frequencies, this would be an interim pattern between a 100 hertz awakened mind and a 100 hertz evolved mind, which is pretty amazing. For her awakened mind during this meditation, at times when she produced the awakened mind patterns, a very high 91%, very high, not very high, but a high evolved mind of 31, a very high Gamma Synchrony of 55%. And then what she reported was, my initial sense of consciousness expansion was not clear. Wait a second. I have lost her because hers was definitely clear. Let me go back and where did she go? I lost her. Here she is. My consciousness opened more every day. I had the most intense experiences clearing things, and she was definitely able to clear them with that much access to that much theta and getting answers to lots of my questions. Opening to closing baselines, she had an eyes open awakened mind, 24%. By the end of the training, 68%, meaning that she externalized her alpha and her awakened mind pattern. That 68% is very close to the 75% that we see as the bottom of the eyes closed awakened mind pattern on training level 5, and consider that to be really good. But look, she externalized it, and then her eyes closed, 88 to 90%. She already had a good eyes closed pattern, but all this gamma, all of these realizations that she had externalized her to a 68% eyes open, and that is extraordinarily impressive. This gentleman is a non-meditator. He came along with his wife. We'll see her patterns in a moment. He is a retired civil engineer. It was his first program at TMI. He said his wife dragged him to the program. She had been to one previous program. And he didn't have a whole lot of alpha. And when he did, that alpha was a low peak amplitude alpha down here at 9 hertz. So he did some clicking out. You can see this top band of theta is right there, smack on his lowest band of alpha. And so the potential for clicking out in that pattern is tremendous. But on the other hand, he wouldn't click out because he had all this gamma. Look at the massive gamma in that pattern, all the way up to 91. So this is a case where there's no doubt whatsoever, but that the SAM frequencies made a difference for this guy. They totally lifted him up into a higher state of consciousness where he was able to have this experience. This was titled Virtuality, and so he says in his self-report afterwards, what is my bliss? Relationships, that was the question asked. Bob asked him to meditate on before the meditation started. Well, his answer was relationships with people came to mind as an important desire for the rest of this life. I felt happy and relaxed. I was more in my head thinking instead of letting go, but at one point I sensed light inside a sphere. Well, that's the kind of thing you're going to get with this gamma. Gravity holds the universe together. Love holds the spirits together. They are not visible, but are the most powerful forces there are. Now, he was not one of my 4 people, but I can guarantee you that whether Laura or Robin monitored him, there's no way this guy had had this kind of experience before. So he writes in his closing self-assessment, here is his Gamma Synchrony score of 23%. So you see, you don't have to have a massively high Gamma Synchrony score, just enough gamma. Well, he'd have had a much higher score if he'd had more alpha. My initial sense of consciousness expansion was not clear, but as the week progressed, it became clearer. I have gained some insights into my emotional state. So his score is the main big changes for him. Eyes closed, Gamma Synchrony, he went from 24% to 31%. And then from the animal meditation, since he's missing all this alpha, and alpha is the basis of the pattern, 31%, which is very, very, very low. To 46%, which is also a very low score for the awakened mind because he just doesn't have the alpha. Now, in the baselines, he didn't have this gamma at all. So here's a very, very strong evidence that it was the gamma beats that, despite the low amplitude alpha, took him into this huge higher state realization. He came away a different person. So this lady, I showed you her pattern on an earlier slide. She had a Kundalini awakening, and she was the one who would shake during meditation. So we really had to parse through her data and, take segments of it and make sure we weren't looking at artifact. It might not have been artifact, but anything that had like a spike instead of a surge, we took that out. So in this meditation called Who is Happy, she wrote, I went to the mother. I asked, what do you love about me? Over and over. Waves of love shook my body. You are what I love about me, the mother said, meaning us humans. Now, if that's not a transcendent realization, I don't know what is, because it says that we're all one, doesn't it? It says she was asking a question about separation, and the answer came back, no, we're all one, and what I love about me is you. And so this note says, no SEMG artifact, 100 hertz gamma flares, and look at the massive gamma flares. So this is a 100 hertz awakened mind pattern. If you were to superimpose our 44 hertz pattern on that, which is exactly what we've done, and we're about to get pattern statistics for 100 hertz awakened mind because of people like this lady, it would look exactly like this, more so here. But still, that would be within the ratios of the pattern. But then look at what happened with her gamma. It's almost an evolved mind top of the circle for the top half of the pattern, more so here than here. What happens, we see in the lower frequency evolved mind, and we don't know why. I think we're starting to know why. It has to do with the concentration of consciousness. But when you're in an evolved mind top, whether apparently it's the lower frequencies or higher frequencies, you get this little mushroom stem down at the bottom. And that's what she produced here. So an evolved mind pattern this strong, it's no surprise that she had this experience. So she started out with training level 5 and 4. For the awakened mind, she started out with 81%, which is a pretty high score. She started out with the evolved mind at 16, not such a high score. But I'm sorry, this is who is happy. This isn't the baseline. This is just this meditation. Gamma Synchrony, 60%, 27%. That's huge. But it would have been bigger, you see, if we'd been measuring a 100 hertz pattern. These statistics actually penalize her for having all this amplitude up here. Because if you take this alpha and you put the gamma on top of it, the software is going to say, oh, I can't even measure this, and it's not going to take this into account at all, these 3 higher frequency bars. So it's going to be really great that we get these pattern statistics, and it's going to take a while before we really see, we know it's 5 now, training level 5 for 75% to 98% for the most advanced meditators. But it's going to take us a while to figure out what the statistics are for the 100 hertz patterns. So she wrote in her closing self-assessment, I have integrated my expansion into normal waking consciousness, and I am more aware of my more detailed dreams. I feel calmer and more integrated and more aware of gamma surges than before. Partly that's because she really worked on her Kundalini and the shaking and everything. I told her, she was in my group, we need to dive more into your theta, and then that gamma will reduce in amplitude and be more integrated with the pattern. That's exactly what she did. And by George, it stopped the Kundalini shaking, except during the waves of love, which was fortunate. She's an RN. She practices Hemi-Sync and SAM and heart-focused breathing. She has done 6 to 8 programs at TMI. And her biggest scores, the eyes open, Gamma Synchrony 22 to 53%. That is becoming super conscious and taking it out into an eyes open state. She went from an eyes open awakened mind because she had so much gamma to start with, 22%. For her awakened mind is extraordinarily low score. Well, not so much with eyes open, but still 24 to 68% for eyes closed score, very high to start with, didn't change a whole lot. So I'm going to leave some time open for questions at the end of this if you want to just jot them down. So this is a gentleman who has been to many TMI programs. As a matter of fact, 56 TMI programs since 1995. And he has had previously some very profound experiences. But what hampered him was immediately noticeable, and it's his 9 hertz alpha peak. See this? During Who is Happy, even Set Point, every single one, he's got this 9 hertz alpha peak, although by the latter part, the 10 hertz, the 10.5 hertz alpha, he was producing much more of that, and it was enough to start keeping him awake so that he had some really great experiences. So in Who is Happy, he said, I felt tired and frustrated. Well, because he's got all this theta and all this delta and not enough alpha to sustain that, and low alpha peak to boot. But it still had an awakened mind decent score of 72%, but very low gamma synchrony score because he's way down in his lower frequencies. Set point, I brought energy to the crown of my head. Well, awakened mind better, because you bring that energy at the crown and your gamma synchrony score is going to rise up. This holographic nature of the awakened mind, the whole mind mirror patterns. He brings the energy into his crown, his gamma synchrony goes up to 9 out of 3 triples actually. And then his awakened mind increased quite enormously. Virtuality, he found a little technique. He was trying to do some sensualization to wake himself up out of that 9 hertz alpha peak. He says, I brought energy to my crown and pituitary. I worked to expand my boundaries and tried to visualize. Okay, well, same thing. Gamma Synchrony is still higher than the start. Awakened mind's not quite as high, a little bit more evolved mind, which you would expect because now you see his pattern is starting to round more at the bottom. By presence 40, now he's going into a kind of an awakened mind experience. I was thinking about dolphins and hanging on the back and tail of one. I was at SeaWorld and then a beach with people. I stayed there with no thoughts. Well, that was new for him because he had been plagued by, feeling tired, frustrated, talking, being really aggravated with clicking out. Although, to be clear, a click out, as I subsequently discovered in my own brainwave patterns, is not the same as subconscious trance and delta sleep. So because he's actually doing something, having an active meditation, he gets higher awakened mind scores now. 7 compared to 72, 90, 87, 85. But his training level 4 scores are also increasing for the awakened mind. More evolved mind, because now he's in joy, and this pattern, circularity, for the evolved mind has increased quite a bit. He started at 4 and then 4 and then 6%, and now it's at 14. So that's significant, but not so much Gamma Synchrony because again he's down here in the bottom of his pattern. So he writes in his closing self-assessment, due to the brainwave component, and he was very enthusiastic about us, I now have a better understanding, physical evidence of my mental experience. I learned that something is going on even though it doesn't seem to be. He's an ontologist, which means that he goes around exploring what everything means, and a massage therapist, does a walking meditation 7 days a week. And in the end, in his opening to closing baselines, he has awakened mind with eyes open. He does have an eyes open awakened mind. That alpha you see here that drops to the 9 hertz peak when he closes his eyes, it's actually present when his eyes are open. This guy is extraordinarily smart. I don't know that I've ever seen an eyes open score for the awakened mind, 77, much less an increase to 78. The evolved mind, 2 to 35%, all because of this rounding of this pattern. Upturned delta, he's exploring his unconscious mind. He's bringing things to consciousness. And for the evolved mind, he increased the animal from 4 to 14. His Gamma Synchrony, despite all this activity happening down here in his lower and slower frequencies, it actually increases Gamma Synchrony. Thank you for the binaural beats, Bob. From eyes closed 6 to 13%. And so I spent so much time on him just to say, well, because it's interesting, but also he was in the, came back to my table for the December RV and OBE, and he was one of the highest target hitters. Once he managed that 9 hertz alpha peak, he just absolutely tore it up with the target attainment, and it was not in the slightest bit easy to do. So the next person, this is a woman who became a dear friend. She says, I had a wonderful week of watching my experiences become deeper and richer. Messages were accessible and visual imagery was greatly enhanced. I feel more free, abandoned to engage. The meanings of metaphors were immediately available to my understanding. Now I have tools to carry forward to sustain my ongoing journey. Well, she was a retired property manager, occasional body meditation practice with that self-talk I mentioned earlier, where she's got this 15 hertz beta that's commentating, although not in a bad way, it's processing. Yes, powerful Kundalini awakening years earlier. So why she had such a great self-assessment, closing self-assessment? One of the reasons was what her experience in crystal clarity. She said, I loved the music in this meditation. I was dancing and could feel the movement of each finger and arm. I hit the perfection moment and it was sustained. I may dance through life, doing this thing that brings me great joy. I may dance through life. and that's how she reported it to me. This is figurative and literal. A quiet time came. It was like being in the desert, quite beautiful. When the music returned, I started dancing again. My deceased ex-husband joined me, and we danced together in a life of perfection that hadn't existed. Our relationship reframed itself in a higher level of consciousness. Now, this is her mind mirror summary for the whole session. You can see that she's got way up into the 100 hertz range with amplitude. Normally, you know, this is flat, 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 flat. Even the Gamma Synchrony mid-range is flat in most people. But look at all the amplitude that she's got. Big, strong alpha bridge and an upturned delta. This is a screenshot that I took from this meditation. Massive, almost the same evolved mind. Well, it is an evolved mind top, all the way up to 100 hertz. Just gorgeous pattern. Now this one, this was one of Robin's people. And what she did, Robin is a wonderful researcher, and she loves to drill down into the data and discover things too. Sometimes people can tell you when they had an experience, and that was the case here. So Robin was able to look at the summary amplitude windows and see when everything increased, her low gamma, her mid gamma, and her upper gamma. So she pulled out these screenshots, and let's look at what she was doing first so that these have meaning. This was Presense 40. She says, the first half of the experience, I was not getting much visual. Then I saw a hydrangea in my yard. My arm was hurting. Then I somehow became my dog, a black lab. I was licking my sore arm. I was walking around the yard, experiencing life about 18 inches off the ground. Yet I was very aware of my mind here. I experienced a soreness in my throat. I sensed everything through my dog. As the dog, I was lonely and wanting me to come home. So this made me fill him with love and joy and the knowledge that I would be home. At some point, after I calmed him, I transported into my body here. I don't remember transporting out, but remember coming back. Now, for context, this is a retired family judge and a non-meditator who's done only one gateway program. She was a bit surprised by this experience herself. This is another case where the Gamma SAM beats are really making a difference for her. They're giving her a pathway, sort of suspended bridge that she can use to basically have an out-of-body experience and merge with her dog. So here she is at 7:24 minutes. She's got this massive alpha bridge at 9 hertz. So she's way down there in her subconscious, and there's no way she's going to sleep because there's so much amplitude in this alpha bridge. This was an anomalous pattern for her, if I remember correctly. And we have a bit of a, well, I have it, I'll just say that's only mine, theory that these super high amplitudes of alpha lead one from 5 sensory awareness to 6th sensory awareness. And boy, that's what she had by 31 minutes. So Robin captured these screenshots. 3103, she slams into this massive 100 hertz gamma synchrony pattern with the beginnings of an evolved mind flare on the right. 3107, 4 seconds later, same pattern. She is just rocking and rolling in this dog. 3119, same pattern. 3232, she sustained this pattern for a really long period of time. You know, you're timeless when you're in a higher state of consciousness. So much can happen in 5 seconds. She sustained this pattern for what, 1 minute and 29 seconds. And you can also see massive pattern amplitude changes. She goes, this is 30 microvolts to capture all her alpha. When she went into this pattern, 17 microvolts, and that's the attenuation scale that we have to readjust to get the whole pattern visible in the window. And then here she jumped up to 20, then to 17, to 20. This is You know, very possibly when she was turning her awareness to, I'm in my dog, but wait a minute, I'm also here in my body. But wait, how can I be in my dog? Wait, I'm here in my body. Pretty extraordinary stuff. For this whole session, she had good patterns down in the lower frequencies where the awakened mind and the evolved mind are, only a 16% gamma synchrony. But for this 3-minute segment, awakened mind 97%, and then at a training level 420, very high. Evolved mind 32%, and 3 gamma synchrony 67% at 15. Huge scores. So she wrote in her closing self-assessment, this workshop increased my ability to allow my mind, question mark, is it my mind or what was it, to go outside of my physical self. I learned that I have the ability to center myself and feel better with a few simple tools. I don't know what those are, but I expect they're going to be Hemi-Sync and SAM meditations. I feel that I have a strong reason to be happy, to make the world a better place. And as she makes the world a better place, she'll do it in the courtroom, and that will just be lovely. Right? So this person is a financial planner. He practices free flow 1 hour a day, has been involved with TMI since 1985. You don't see it in these patterns that I happen to capture, but he was also plagued with a descending 9 hertz alpha peak that would send him down into his theta subconscious and his delta unconscious, so that he would just move into non-conscious state. He didn't like that. I mean, turns out that the click out, if it were a click out, is highly beneficial for many reasons that we won't go into here. But this guy wanted to have waking experiences in waking awareness. You know, he wanted things to happen. So in animal meditation, the 10.5 peak is there because it's an alpha meditation where you're projecting your mind into this animal, and it's not really asking you to go deep. Also, it's only about 10 minutes long, so he didn't have time to fall asleep. So he wrote, I was a blue heron, noble and honorable. I lived with a mate in a bird community on an island. I had the freedom to go where I needed to go, abundance, oneness with nature. What made me afraid was the idea that I was missing something I should be doing and just didn't know about it. You know, I mean, I think all of us on some level have that concern. You can't be everywhere simultaneously unless you're omniscient. So maybe we have this idea of, did I get all of that, or what, is there more to get? The fact that this came up in his animal sensualization from his subconscious mind says that it wanted him to pay very, very close attention to that issue. The idea that I was missing something I should be doing and just didn't know about it. Well, he gets to the set point. Now, he's got a lot of delta, 24 microvolts, and you typically are going to see that in healers. So he had the potential to expand his awareness, his personal unconscious mind, into the collective unconscious to get information. And that's what he did during set point. You can see he had this big flare of this gorgeous evolved mind pattern. He merged right into the field after a lot of coaching on that descending 9 hertz and how to stay awake. And at set point, with the gamma beats, he found himself saying, I was talking to a spiritual lady. I said I wanted to surrender. She said to put a sword in the heart chakra and surrender to the universe. I went through my normal symbols, went to focus level 27. I floated and let the meditation take itself over. I tried to just be. By the end of the training, he hadn't quite gotten the message of how to just let go and be. But this evolved mind pattern showed that he has the capacity, and I'm quite sure will, because his closing self-assessment said, expansion of consciousness was large on the scale of being. I woke up 4 times a night and always remembered being in REM. His awakened mind scores jumped from eyes open, an enormously high value, 80% to 94%. You know, the guy's awake, he just was falling asleep in meditation. Gamma Synchrony, significantly from a 5% to a 13% with eyes open. So we're almost at the end of these, just a few more. This person has beautiful brain waves. She had she has an eyes open awakened mind. But what I was trying to show on this rather cluttered screenshot is that she is one of those people who basically hangs around in the same pattern all the time, unless and until something extraordinary happens, such as this evolved mind flare here, this almost evolved mind flare there, and then this beautiful awakened mind pattern with Gamma Synchrony too, alternated with Gamma Synchrony during virtuality. She said of that meditation, I processed some spiritual healing, one with my spiritual committee. I went through blissful childhood memories, doing art, horseback riding, being at the beach. Now my bliss is helping people and teaching. And then here's the clue to the evolved mind patterns. Because the other, you know, could have been Gamma Synchrony, it could have been an awakened mind. But she goes to non-physical beings to learn about cosmic healing and got 2 more cosmic healings herself. Well, that's where her Gamma Synchrony pattern went up to 45%. And she gained all this gamma. And in fact, she wrote in her closing self-assessment that she got to expanded states, her mental emotional health improved. She likes the SAM technology. She loved the mind mirror verification that the work she's been doing has made a difference. She's actually a TMI trainer and a brilliant trainer. One of those people who you can set off a cannonball explosion around and she'll just turn calmly and go, oh, well, that was a cannonball explosion, you know, which is why her pattern maintains this strong awakened mind the whole time. I mean, a 97% for eyes closed is extremely high. But when she moves from awakened mind, well, set point 88%, that was her highest SAM, awakened mind. Evolved mind, SAM, vibe flow, 31%. Gamma Synchrony during the SAM meditation, 42%. She was really rocking and rolling in these Gamma Synchrony patterns. You see these 40-something%. So she really has an awakened mind that's capable of going into an evolved mind and holding on to and sustaining a lot of gamma. And that is no small achievement. Now here's where we ran into trouble. This lady, a beautiful lady, she has done 30 TMI programs, retired analyst, she meditates regularly. She could not get comfortable in these meditations. And so therefore this SEMG artifact, at time, mostly in gamma surges, we had to discount it from the statistics whatsoever because she reported such intense discomfort. And in that situation, you just can't know whether it's real gamma or what. Her neck was really bothering her. Even after she moved to an air bed, it was still bothering her. In the end, the only way to tell if this is real gamma or not is to hook her up when her neck's not hurting. So we had to just rely on her subjective experiences, mystical experience here. But see, none of the statistics work because this might be real alpha, but that's, I don't know if that's real gamma or it's real SEMG or what it is. But whatever it was, we couldn't really say anything about hers. Statistically anyway. There were some statistical changes, but what really counts is that she said, I experienced a really nice sense of expansion during the week. I'm not sure what it means. I'm feeling more relaxed, feeling balanced. I learned that I was skipping alpha. Now I want to focus. So maybe the simple answer here is that she's going to increase her alpha, and it's, if this is real gamma or real beta, that's going to bring that down into lower and slower frequencies. Yeah, really the only things that changed, because statistically she went down, down, down in her statistics. Just this one, for eyes closed, Gamma Synchrony 8 to 13%, eyes closed, evolved mind 21 to 29, eyes closed, awakened mind 11 to 11. So we really couldn't say much at all about her brainwave patterns. Only 2 more slides, I think, in case you're getting tired, and I'll talk a little faster. So this person is a psychophysiologist and a parapsychologist. He practiced TM and Taoism, has 5 TMI programs that he's done. He's actually a researcher and a very fine analytical thinker, and he's a leader in the field of research in terms of advising others. He's done a lot of research with TMI as well. Here again, we see that diamond pattern, the same pattern that Max Cade showed that it has his own pattern in the back of the book, the Awakened Mind book. He had opening to closing scores for the Gamma Synchrony pattern from 34 to 50%, which is really good for eyes open. For eyes closed, 20 to 30, 23%. For the animal, 28 to 34. So these are really nice, significant scores. But his scores were really increasing a lot, mostly in the evolved mind, because of all this rounding that you see in his pattern. 33 for eyes closed, 35 for eyes closed to 55, animal 31 to 47, major gains. He had an experience during crystal clarity where he had really a download of either past life memories, although he doesn't resonate with that idea at all. He had a flash of, well, I'll just read it because it's really interesting. He says he had more imagery, but it was hazy, and that's because he's got this high amplitude theta. He asked to be shown what was important, and in the corner of my visual field, I saw a zipper. So I pulled the zipper on what seemed to be a black case, but nothing was inside. I also had a flash of Vietnam Army boots, a newsreel in black and white of soldiers marching, and a guy in a white t-shirt sliding under warning tape, holding a gasoline pump and then lighting himself on fire. I don't understand what any of this means and feel a bit frustrated about being shown things I don't understand. Well, the frustration is not showing up in his pattern. What's showing up is the gamma with which he saw all of these experiences down in his theta and delta, because the gamma is what kept him awake. Otherwise, he'd have been either a circular bliss in the field and a gone pecan, or he would have clicked out. But he had all these gamma amplitudes, and gamma provides extremely clear imagery. So what it was, I don't know that he knows now. I think he's on board with us today. If something's come up, maybe he will comment on that. But then in Presence 40, he had another interesting experience, kinesthetic, where he was running energy throughout his body, taking it from the ground, and notice the amplitudes down here, and through the top of the head, storing it in his heart, moving out, had a strong kinesthetic sense of this energy during the meditation. Now that is a wonderful landmark for the awakened mind, 86% there. And I should have pointed out that in crystal clarity, his Gamma Synchrony score was 72%, was extremely high, and his evolved mind extremely high for 74. So both of these patterns are the patterns in which you will have a spontaneous, can have a spontaneous inflow of energy and information. So whatever this was would have meant something. So he wrote, vast expansion, I had more dreams than usual. The brainwave component gave me great images to guide me in the future in terms of landmarks. He said, experience brings the books to life. He had read Anna Wise's book and may have read Max Cade's as well. I had lots of fun in general. So you can see that he really increased his scores. but most importantly, I think, got some terrific landmarks. So this person is a biomedical technician with 42-year meditator. He's done TMI programs for 19 years, used Hemi-Sync for 24 years. He's actually someone I know who is in my meditation group up here in Pennsylvania. A lovely, lovely man. And he had really astonishing brainwaves in terms of the awakened mind pattern. But when he gets to TMI, and he's in these 40-minute meditations, and he loses his alpha peak. His goes right on down into theta. And so a lot of our advice, my advice to him, he was with Robin, her advice to him this week was to take this alpha peak, raise it as higher if you can, and really be in a state of calm surrender and acceptance. Actually, he was with me for this meditation. So in the animal, I was a fox. That's all we got out of him. But in set point, he said this was his best meditation ever. He was a hawk watching the sunrise. White light was flowing into his head. Someone tuned into me, and I saw my wings as I flew. So this was more of his regular pattern, where he's got 79% awakened mind. His Gamma Synchrony wasn't terribly high at 25, but it's not bad either. That's a lot of people would beg to have this pattern. But in presense, now he's gone into more of an awakened mind situation, where he's actually got an awakened mind on the right and a Gamma Synchrony on the left. His Gamma Synchrony goes up to 67% and his awakened mind to 92%. So the SAM beats are really supporting him here as he manages he stayed awake because of the gamma, you see. Even he still had that 9 hertz alpha peak, but the left brain gamma kept him awake. He was on the plateau again, watching the sunrise. Someone came on the plateau. I became that person. Who came? Well, he didn't say. But it was extremely profound and meaningful to him. He was sleepy at times, but this gamma kept him awake. His mind was quieter at the end of the week. I gained more focus and a sense of purpose in life. I had more dreams than usual at TMI, more vivid and with better recall. I feel more focused and grounded, and I have a better sense of my brainwave states. I see what I need to work on in my meditations. I learned more about my pursuit of happiness. Awakened mind, eyes closed, from 56 to 91%. Astonishing. From the animal, 42% to 95%. So it's his alpha that increased during the week, you see, so that he had more access to himself and to who he wants to be in life. Pretty amazing stuff. I think this is our last slide. Let me see. Yes. Okay, so this person is an executive, a 20-year meditator, has done 10 TMI programs. I captured 3 different meditations because this awakened mind score was not really high, 65%. For an executive, you would expect to see higher, but part of the reason for that was a massive Gamma Synchrony score at 74%. She reported that she was channeling in her higher self. She felt joy and happiness, hello Gamma, and saw the need to let go and open up more. And she does. Her alpha increases to match more of that Gamma and these next 2 meditations. In Vibe Flow, she said, now her awakened mind score has increased to 71, more in the range of the highly developed person she is. She loved the music, ran around the room to get up speed to go visit her dead relatives. She literally, moved into her energy body. And that's her bottom line comment. We are immortal. And you can see that her hemispheric balance, her symmetry has increased quite a bit. She's still in Gamma Synchrony, 68, but compared to 74 when she was channeling, actually, there was a funny story about this. We were hooking her up, and they just told us, I think you told it, Bob, at the professional division seminar, and we couldn't get, she was, I think, Laura's client, and they couldn't, I was completely unaware of this, so they couldn't get a clean reading on her. They worked and they worked and they worked, but she had all this high gamma. And finally, Bob walked over and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm channeling." And he said, "Quit that." so we could get a good baseline on her. So she's a very advanced person. But you see how the values change depending on what you're doing. And interestingly enough, we go to the animal closing baseline, and her Gamma Synchrony score is the highest yet because she was doing something she loved. She was an osprey. She loved feeding her babies and hunting for knowledge, treasure, and adventure. So that's a very powerful landmark for her. She's increased her awakened mind to its highest levels, possibly the highest level it's going to get, with 46% evolved mind and this really huge Gamma Synchrony, 83% at 31. But she's also balanced that out, and she got more alpha. And that's why she said, "I had an inner sense of expansion that felt very tangible, very real, very nice. I have a better sense of what is going on in my brainwaves when I channel. Despite what has been happening in my life, and it was a lot, I am positioned today with love in my heart for the phoenix to rise anew. I am excited to observe the unfolding of my next adventure, knowing I can always stay connected through love with my family and friends." And here she is, doing just that in the animal sensualization, past, present, and future. So her best, most impressive scores were Gamma Synchrony for the opening baseline, 60 to 69. For the animal in Gamma Synchrony, a change from 66 to 83. Now here is the work of not just love and what she realized about how to activate it, but this is also the SAM beats that are making almost a 20 percentile change in her gamma scores. For the evolved mind, she went from the opening, eyes closed, 33 to 43, animal 39 to 46, awakened mind from 66 to 75. That's pretty impressive. So she just did a stunning job all around, as did they all, really. Our findings were that the Hemi-Sync SAM beats stimulate gamma frequencies and states of awareness in which people have superconscious perspectives and profound, often life-changing insights. The brilliant brain and body landmark these higher states of consciousness and seem to prefer them. I wrote seem, but that's because at times I try to be conservative. But we all know that the brain prefers higher states of consciousness, and why wouldn't it want to revisit the most extraordinary experience it's ever had? And the second finding, the awakened mind, evolved mind, and Gamma Synchrony patterns can extend up to 100 Hertz intact in the mind mirror display. Now, how they do this, I have no idea, because Steve Clark didn't just come up with some filtering system that filtered those upper frequencies so they would fall into that pattern. They're just filtered to stop them from disrupting the lower frequencies and the patterns that we know and understand. So this was a massive aha for us, that we could see these three patterns extending up to 100 Hertz in tandem with people's reports that this is when they had their most extraordinary experiences. So I wrote, imminent software advances will measure them statistically, these 100 Hertz patterns. Then these studies prove that upper, mid, and lower gamma frequencies statistically refine the evolved mind and awakened mind patterns. Now, this was something that came out of Max Cade's book. I knew that this was true because Cade wrote it and he was a genius like Bob Monroe. He wrote, and it was only one line at the bottom of one of the patterns in the back of his book, and he said that that a higher state of consciousness will, I don't know what word he said, but at the time I've interpreted it and used it now to say inform and stabilize lower states of consciousness. And that's what we found here, that when somebody is experiencing gamma frequencies, these patterns, statistics refine, and why wouldn't they? I mean, think about the voltage, the electrical voltage that's moving into the frontal lobes and the hippocampus, in fact, all over the brain. So why wouldn't our patterns, our highest state patterns, including Gamma Synchrony, all three of them, why wouldn't those patterns become more refined? And as they do become more refined, they promote brain-body coherence that people experienced as relaxation, well-being, and happiness. And those patterns give rise to compassion, creative insights, and the evolution of consciousness. And then lastly, these unprecedented and thus historical studies have added significant data on and understanding of gamma and its awareness to the international knowledge base on consciousness. Certainly to our knowledge base. And I think that when Ross Dunseith crunches the data over at the University of Virginia, he is a research coordinator, I think. Maybe Bob can correct me on that. He's one of the big guns. I don't even like to use that metaphor. Let's say he's one of the beacons of light at the Department of Perceptual Studies. And that is one of the leaders in consciousness research in the world. And so Ross is going to take our recordings and manipulate the data into Excel and synthesize it and take it as proof of the executive report that I wrote. He likes it just as it is, and just run the data. So this is extremely exciting. It's not just mind mirror people, but it's everyone who is going to begin to understand the changes these gamma frequencies make and allow people to reach in consciousness and what it means. That we're doing this with 16 people at a time is a control in itself. And that we can, I mean, the executive summary is a synthesis that points out that people don't necessarily experience the gamma in the same patterns because people's patterns are uniquely theirs. But certainly you can see the surges. And when the surges happen, after they happen, that's when they start having these extraordinary experiences. So I think that this is going to move the mind mirror and TMI in tandem into some, I don't want to say a spotlight, let's just say a realm of light within the research world where people will find us and believe us and thus begin to understand that these subjective reports that people are making are visible in the data. And because they're visible in the data, they'll pay more attention. And then we add to this international knowledge base. And then that's all, folks. Until you see the extraordinary results of the December 2017 OBE and RV program, which happily is about 2 weeks from being completed. It's been quite a journey to work on that study because, wow, talk about all kinds of complexities in it. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, you know, unless they told us, well, that's when I perceived what was inside the box on top of the rafter at X period in the first minute, or when it changed to a pummeling sound, or when the ohm sound came in. We just can't match the subjective and the objective. And so we're just, we've spent like On the first study, it was about 15 to 20 hours per person. It's running 30 and 40 hours per person now per report, and the reports have run up to 48 pages so far. So the compilation of statistics, Bob, I'm happy to say, is done, except for 2 or 3 more. But I'm going to start writing the executive summary now and splice those last 3 people in, because I'm quite determined to get this to you before we go back to TMI in June for the next study. And wearing bells and being very happy and excited to do this again.
Judith, can
Yeah.
I ask a quick question here?
Oh, please, this is it, questions and answers.
Yeah, when you're reporting the statistics, you're reporting the numbers, the percentages at level 5.
Yes, pretty much.
And
But
then
also,
the second number is what, level 4?
yes, exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing to us that so many people had high statistics for a training level 4. It's very unusual. And then questions from anybody else. Please feel free to unmute your button and ask away.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, why do you stop at a frequency of 100? Is there a technical reason your equipment can't measure reliably beyond that, or?
No, I asked for 100. Oh, no. I did ask for 100, but it's also that that Velistis developed a very stable 100 hertz sensor. They just wanted to see if they could do it, and they did it. It requires, really advanced electronics to process 256 samples per second. And I do know that other manufacturers are measuring up to 125, but honestly, I couldn't even imagine that we would see any amplitudes up to at or even approaching 100 above 64 hertz. So who knows, maybe they will develop. Right now we're keeping them so busy with software advances. I certainly don't want to ask for a more advanced EEG sensor, but may I ask, Arvid, are you asking because you have some experience with a sensor that's above 100 hertz?
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, just a good round number. Anybody else?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good. I have 2 questions. One is the how to raise yourself out of the alpha where you're going to click out. I didn't quite understand what somebody might do.
Yeah, well, the main thing, and this is basic mind mirror theory, Gary and Donna know it, all the mind mirror people do. It is very dependable, a reliable way, and it's just to sharpen your sensory imagery. Let's say you're floating down a boat on the river of life, and you feel yourself getting so relaxed that you're starting to daydream your way into sleep. The thing you could do very quickly, if you can catch yourself, is to look at the edges of the boat and scrutinize the fibers of wood, or you can look at the sky and start watching the clouds. And then if you start to slip away again, you look harder and sharper. You're literally increasing through, I don't know if this is the underlying theory, but I would expect that it is that you're sharpening your inner imagery, which on some level is having something to do with your tensing the muscles in your eyes. And then that sensory is affecting, it's happening down here in the back of your brain in the occipital lobes, and it's raising your alpha peak from 9 hertz up to 10.5, which is closer to waking awareness, but it's not taking you into waking awareness. It's staying sensory enough for you to stay leveled out at the 10.5 hertz alpha peak. Now, some people, as I showed you, can stay perfectly well awake with a 9 hertz alpha peak. If you've got a lot of gamma on top of it, well, it's not going to be a problem. But we did see 6 out of 14 people who had consistent problems with that descending alpha peak. And Robin and Laura knew exactly what to tell them, and they all succeeded. Every single one of them succeeded in raising their alpha peak and having more profound experiences as a result.
Now, are the SAM music, the beats, is that available?
Well, Bob, will you answer that?
There are some SAM signals available that are blended with music. You can get them at the TMI bookstore, and I think they're online, some of the downloads. But the ones that we use in these programs are more experimental, and because the people are there present and they're going through it for a whole week, the signals there get a little bit more intense. And I wouldn't be comfortable just giving those out on the open market to people who weren't prepared, because it can be a little difficult sometimes. You have to kind of build up a acclimatization to it. Too much too fast, it either won't work at all or it might be uncomfortable. So no, they're not available to buy, but they're available to experience at the Institute, of course.
Okay, thank you.
But you're also saying that there are some SAM meditations in on the Monroe Institute.
Yes, and they're very useful, and especially for building up, the Gamma Synchrony practice. They're very useful. It's just that in the course of 20 exercises during a week, we really build up to some different things, and we're testing things we've not tried before. And as Judith's presentation just demonstrated, some of the things we tested did really well, and that's exciting.
And I'll just add to that some years ago, I mentioned attending a program at TMI in 2012 and came back with a gateway CD. And so I hooked myself up to the mind mirror, and by the time I reached focus level, I don't know, 12, maybe I think it was 18, I saw in this amplitude window this huge gamma surge, just way, way, way up. So the Hemi-Sync recordings as well can take you into some gamma states. I mean, the main thing is, I didn't say anything about it, but this was Max Cade's statement, and I think was also well known to people in his time. And boy, is it proving increasingly true, is that hemispheric symmetry is the key to all higher states of consciousness. If you don't have hemispheric symmetry, if one side of your brain is going and doing one thing and another side is doing something, then thought and energy are not flowing between them without some level of resistance. It's not that we don't see some people in an evolved mind right brain and an awakened mind left brain, because the left brain is processing what the right brain's doing. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but if there's a lot of hemispheric asymmetry, then life is not as good and experiences are not as profound. And that is Bob Monroe's bottom line with working, patenting Hemi-Sync, and then taking people on these journeys. And the binaural beats do balance the brain. I mean, they've got brain scans showing you that that the brain is more balanced and consciousness is more diffused in terms of its electrical activity. And so Hemi-Sync will balance the brain and open the door to these experiences. And then maybe some more of these SAM meditations will become available in the bookstore. And, once the door's open, anything's possible. Other questions?
Yes. Are there any plans to bring this program to somewhere in Europe?
Bob, I think Beth's on. You guys want to address that?
Sure, let's do it. We would need a sponsor.
Yeah. And there are gateway programs. Beth, maybe you want to weigh in and unmute your microphone if you can. Beth travels to Europe and is going to do so pretty soon to present gateway programs. At the professional development divisions thing I went to last month, I met a man who has got a phenomenal program with many facets in Italy. I met people in Spain who have the same thing. Mexico, right now I can't even remember the different parts of the world. So these gateway programs are everywhere. Now, the one that we're talking about here, which Bob has specially designed the beats for, the SAM for, the content of the programs and all that, that's what he would like sponsorship for. But you can attend gateway programs. The person who got me and the Institute for the Awakened Mind hooked in with TMI definitively, although I'd been psychically knocking on that door for quite some time, was Niket Kaitan, who runs these programs in India. So they're literally all over the place. I expect you could go to the, I see Beth, are you turned on?
Yes, I am. There are a number of places in Europe and Japan that run TMI programs. Belgium, Italy, Spain, the UK, and even there may be programs in Greece. And as far as offering this specific program, I don't think that's off the table. I think it'd definitely be on the table. It's just a matter of partnering with someone in the area, and we could look at it. I think it'd be great to take it to Europe.
As Judith knows, we're going to be teaching a workshop in Paris next month in May. And we can talk to the sponsors there, the people who have put together the program, and see if they would be interested in sponsoring something along these lines over there. Both Judith and I will be there.
And
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that they are go-getters. These folks that Gary has been working with are going to, they've already started recording all of Anna Wise's meditations in French, and they're going to be selling that on their website, Quantum Way. So they seem to be unlimited in the things they can accomplish. So yeah, that's a great idea, Gary.
Well, right now I'm translating a SAM program into Spanish and into Italian. And if there's interest in doing it in Paris, I'll honor the French and I'll translate it to French.
Okay, well, they have some excellent translators there that are translating all of our meditation for us.
Okay, perfect.
Well, and Bob, I can't think of any reason not to say this, but this is the same person, Liz Lebrecht, who is also with Jean-Michel Guret, again, thanks to Gary, going to become mind mirror practitioners, and they are the ones who are talking to already about adding binaural and SAM beats and music to Anna Wise's meditation.
Very good.
So that would really fit.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to put all this together.
Yes, wouldn't it? Any other questions? Maybe one or two, and then I want to get back to Bob and ask him to talk about his veterans programs.
I just had a quick question. Does SAM require headphones the way Hemi-Sync does?
It's better, especially for a beginner, to use the headphones because it blocks out external noises and it helps people focus. Okay. Plus, there's some other things going on besides just the audio sound that you're hearing. It takes a while to explain all that, but yes, it does work with just speakers. One time at an addiction conference, it was played in a ballroom with about 500 doctors there, and they enjoyed it quite, effectively. So 500 at a time, sure, with speakers.
And anybody else have a question in the meanwhile? Beth writes, Sylvester runs French programs in Quebec and France.
Yes.
Okay, here's Steve's question. How does the gamma training fit into the traditional mind mirror training, which consists of getting beta under control, then increasing alpha and theta? Oh boy, that's a good and very tough question, actually. So the trick, if you're producing a lot of gamma, is whether that gamma stems from nervous excitability or transcendence. So really, the first step depends on your answer to that question. You know, if you're a very relaxed person and your brainwave pattern shows some gamma, and you've got a nice strong alpha bridge, then you would just train gamma synchrony. There's no sense, you don't want to go back to the awakened mind. You don't want to, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like devolving. You've already passed, you've integrated your gamma, you've already passed the awakened mind pattern of peak flow. You're more moving into a superconscious state. But if the answer is different and it's that, you know, I feel distracted a lot, I have these energy surges in my body, I don't have a real spiritual, because gamma is a spiritual pattern. I mean, it's spiritual, it's intelligence moving in the direction of spiritual experience. If it's not that, and it's more about nervous excitability, then you'd want to go back down to the awakened mind and get that beta down, relax that beta. You know, one thing that I have realized, so slow on the uptake sometimes, is that we're not looking at the alpha-theta ratios enough in our research. Gary's been looking at beta reduction and delta expansion for Dawson Church's studies, and I've just been looking at the patterns, but I think, I don't even remember what it was. Honestly, I've worked on so many projects the past week. Something made me start looking at the alpha-theta ratio, and I started to realize that that's it. If your alpha-theta ratio is low, then need to build your alpha, need to build up that awakened mind. If the alpha-theta ratio is high, well, then go straight to the awakened mind. Wouldn't you agree with that, Gary?
And what would you consider to be a good alpha-theta ratio?
I don't know if I was going back on Dawson Church's studies this week or whether I was doing the TMI studies this week, but I was seeing alpha-theta ratios in the 80s and the 90s. Okay. And when it was low, that's when they were clicking out. Wouldn't I love to find a shortcut, some simple diagnostic measure that we could just tell TMI, hey, you know, their alpha-theta ratio. That would be a really quick study.
Well, you know, one measure is, you know, Swengel's clinical Q, and he's saying that a ratio of 1.8 is what he considers to be good, healthy.
Yeah.
However, you know, when we're looking at clinical alpha-theta ratios for a theta crossover, or we're looking at healing,
that's different,
in terms of bringing up, you know, the unconscious trauma or healing purposes, we have to extend that theta over the alpha without losing consciousness, which is where we have to maintain that beta up around 19 hertz. 15 hertz, somewhere around there. I mean, 15, you know, so that we have to kind of maintain that almost awakened mind pattern, but with a theta crossover, so that we have a theta that's about 1 millivolt greater than the alpha, than the lower alpha, whether it's 9 or 10. And then you begin to get into some very interesting experiences. But when you start bringing that delta up, with that theta crossover, people start getting into, and this is where the research needs to be, we need to look at it, is that they begin to have transpersonal experiences, so-called,
yes.
What we like to call the non-symbolic experiences these days. And so you know, what I think what we need to look at, and this was not being done almost in any research I've seen on the alpha-theta crossover, was utilizing or looking at that upper gamma. So, you know, I think, you know, when these people are having the transpersonal experiences with theta crossover, and you're seeing that delta begin to come up like you would in an evolved mind pattern, they're not looking at the gamma at the upper end of things. And I think we need to look at that to see how that's tying in with those transpersonal experiences.
Yeah, I think that's the key.
So
So
it's a bit of a complicated situation at the moment.
it is, but I think, you know, the complication for neurofeedback people is they're not looking at the patterns like we are in the interrelationships. And I think we're able to get such a good handle on that match between what people report and the patterns itself and the progression of those patterns. Because if you talk to the people and you look at the brainwave pattern, there's always a match. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to me. And so, Steve, I would say that that even though the gamma synchrony pattern itself can have two meanings, it really comes down to what is your experience of life. And if it's, you know, if it's a lot of stress and, you know, you find your eyes clicking from left to right a lot, well, then you'd want to be training on the awakened mind, get that beta down. Sure, that alpha-theta ratio, and the pattern statistics and the mind mirror summary statistics is way up in the 70s and the 80s, even the 90s. So I wonder if we can turn to you, Bob, then, and ask you to tell us a bit about the program with the veterans.
From my experience, there is indeed a very special relationship between delta and gamma. And when you look at those two together as one function in a protocol, it takes on a whole different process. I've worked a lot with addiction patients. I've worked some individually with veterans, and from feedback directly from these people, I've been able to develop several different protocols that are very effective. In the last Event Horizon program we had at the Monroe Institute, where I brought some of those protocols to just general well-being for anyone to benefit from, there was a Vietnam veteran there. And when he first arrived to the program at the Institute, for those of you who have been there, we sleep in these check units, and that's where we do our exercises and meditations. And they're basically a bed built into a cubicle into the wall. So it's kind of an isolation thing. When he was shown his room in the check unit, he said, "Oh no, I'll be sleeping on the floor. I'm not going." He had an issue with that, you know, closed space, and was having, you know, a lot of issues with PTSD. To make a long story short, on the 4th day of the program, he came down and announced to our group that last night was the first night that he had slept peacefully through the entire night since 1968. Okay, so his whole, and then he named me like 3 or 4 of these meds he was going to be able to get off of and all kinds of good stuff. It's, you know, chain reaction from this 4-day, and the experience went on farther than that. So dramatic shifts very quickly. I think, based on what you just talked about, when we go into a meditation that's designed for breaking that wiring into the survival mode, into the emotional charge taking precedence over the cognitive, you know, thinking mode. There are a lot of alpha-theta protocols out there, a lot, and it's all based in neurofeedback, and they have good success. But what I've discovered that takes that success and ramps it up tenfold is, instead of regressing someone into this alpha-theta, which you see with the EMDR and all these other great things, and they're, like, again, they're very successful, but what I do is, instead of going to alpha-theta, I go to delta first. You got to get somebody relaxed first. And that's a pretty easy thing to get even a beginner or a novice meditator or someone who's very stressed, to get them into delta. There's a propensity for your body to feel that's okay and to enjoy that and to do once they get there, then I proceed and take them into ultra low delta, and that's not done in too many places. No other like meditation workshops I've seen. And by ultra low, I'm talking about like 0.4 hertz, 0.1 hertz, very low delta. And this is a really rough metaphor, but basically what's happening is you go into the ultra low delta and then slowly start to ramp back up, is that you're rebooting the system. And a lot of those short circuits and things that weren't working right or were opposed tend to disappear. Not all of it, but some of it each time you do that. Well, as you're ramping back up then into higher delta, then you proceed to present this, and there's a process of different alpha-theta protocol progression that I use. And then that's where the reprocessing takes place, as we talked about. But what's also happening is as soon as they come from the ultra low delta, somewhere in the middle of the delta reorientation, I begin a slow ramp of gamma synchrony. So that by the time they get to the alpha theta processing steps, this gamma synchrony is prominent, and it's getting more and more and more. When the processing at the alpha theta ends, and then we start to bring them back to what we call C1 conscious reality beta, the alpha or the gamma, which is still relative to the delta, which is hard to explain in a short time, is bringing them like this full spectrum experience that locks into memory and feeling and cognition and everything in a coherent way. And so that shift becomes their new reality within a very short time, or just within that one exercise. And I've seen it happen many times. It's the most common reaction, not the one out of 100 miracle that you see sometimes. So it's very, very effective in that process. And the frustration I have is that I've approached people at the VA, I've approached people, other military people, and trying to get this to veterans who, they're highly, in my opinion, traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress is highly underserved. And in fact, some of the treatments, in my opinion, are counterproductive. And there's a great deal of misdiagnosis between traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. So, and I know people are out there doing the very best they can to help people, but it's not enough. And I think this would be a significant thing to add. And what I've been told by the administrators and military people I've talked to is very good. Yes, we'd like to try it, but you have no research basis. We can't just give this to 100,000 people because you say it's a good idea, or your friends told you it really works well. So what we're doing with Mind Mirror and some other projects is hugely important, because we'll be able to get that database that is convincing and validating, that allows commanders and administrators to be able to use some of the technology and the techniques that we develop to help a lot of people who really need it and really deserve it. So that's what I'm trying to do.
This is just amazing work that you're doing, Bob. Not just with TMI, but also with veterans, the people so greatly in need. It's really heartbreaking to think that they've been left behind as they have. And I mean, you're really helping them reclaim their lives. And I talked to Steve Clark about these coherence measurements. This is a new development for the Mind Mirror. Actually, by no coincidence, what coincidences are there? While I was at the professional development seminar last month, we got an email from somebody who wants to measure coherence. The coupling of the waveform from electrode point to electrode point, electrode point to electrode point, here, all over the place, because this is the language of the most advanced neurofeedback measurements.
Right.
And he's working, I told him about this veterans thing and that you wanted the Mind Mirror to be part of it, and he's working very hard on those coherence measurements. And I think that we would love to be part of that project, as a outreach, as a heart-centered way of helping people. I mean, we just discovered in last month's webinar that we can help people with brain injury.
That's right.
And in a way, it certainly is a brain injury, but it's a whole consciousness insult what they've gone through. So I hope that that project works out, and want to thank you so much for sharing the information with us and the being key to this journey of consciousness that we're all on together and all learning how to navigate better together. And thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I hope that you have found it fascinating. Quite a lot has come through the chat. Excellent and very interesting presentation, very interesting stuff. I'll be sure to try one of the SAM downloads from the website, and on it goes. Thank you all. This was an amazing presentation on the scientific affirmation of what we're experiencing as we develop in consciousness. So be it, may it continue. Thank you all for your participation, for your presence, and your support and good energy.
Thank you so much, Judith and Bob. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Loved it.
All right. We'll see you all next time with the next report. Bye for now.
Have fun.